Okay. All right, I'm just gonna leave here so this doesn't. Okay, so for my senior project, I created a cross-platform Xamarin app for the athletics communication department here at Concordia. So initially the problem, I'm going to first jump in and show you what the website looks like for the athletic department. So as you can see, there's a lot of going on all these tabs. There's a lot of information that most students wouldn't really need. Like for example, make a gift. I don't know how many students are going on the athletic website and gonna go make a gift to the athletic department. So there's just a lot going on here and like not stuff that students would actually need. My slides. And then also because there's so much just on the desktop version of the app, the mobile version is even more condensed. So there's really no mobile friendly way to view the website. And then another issue is there is very low attendance at a lot of the sports games here. Obviously, you get a good crowd for football, men's basketball, the sports that are usually the most popular. And I don't think that would change no matter what. But a lot of like the women's sports who are like pretty good. For example, the softball team made the national tournament last year. My team, the women's soccer team, we hosted a conference tournament game and there were actually more fans for the other team. So it kind of felt like an away game, even though we were home. So the way I wanted to solve that is, so I did create a cross-platform app, and then I wanted to have an ability for students to check into games as a sort of an incentive to get people to come to more of the games that aren't usually attended, and then also a way to easily view the roster or the calendar as like a master calendar for all the events, just in case some students like have nothing to do and they're like, oh, let me go like check out this sport game. Now on to the demo. I have to join Zoom here. I'm going to mute myself.
Before we begin, here's an overview of what I'll be talking about today. What problem I am solving, why it needs to be solved, what my proposed solution is, a quick demonstration of said solution, what went right, what went wrong, if I had more time, what I would do next or add, and what I learned from this experience. Before I discuss the problem, I want to begin with the topic of my project, mental health awareness. Mental health, as stated by the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, is what affects how we think, feel, and act. It helps determine how we handle stress, relate to others, and make healthy choices. This is a topic that I find interesting and important. However, I do know that there are individuals that do not think the same. This may be due to the lack of understanding or the lack of knowledge or any other factors. Which leads me to the question, what problem am I trying to solve? The problem is that there is still a need to raise mental health awareness to a larger audience, as well as share ways to cope with it. Now, why does it need to be solved? Over the past several years, mental health awareness has grown with more support and resources than before. And while there is still an overall increase in awareness, there is still stigma and misconceptions about mental health. In many cases, there are still groups of people out there that do not view mental health as equally important as, let's say, physical health. By sharing information and talking openly about mental health, individuals who are suffering can feel like they have more support, which can help them take a step forward with their lives. Not to mention, individuals can seek out coping mechanisms that can benefit them even if they cannot or do not seek professional help that they need. Well, this sounds like a good idea. What is my proposed solution? Well, I decided to create a product that brings awareness in an innovative, interesting way, which can reach a larger audience through means of a 2D role-playing game. Games can bring in a different audience than a normal application or website service can. Of course, there is no denying that games can be harmful both physically and mentally in excess, but there are ways individuals can benefit from them. For example, games can provide a mental stimulation that improves development and critical thinking skills, as well as emotional resilience and stress relief. If done correctly, this game can be beneficial to many. Let us look into how this will work. Essentially, the player takes on the role of the protagonist as they try to live their life. The player gets to experience the ups and downs and the many effects mental health has on an individual, as well as developing coping mechanisms to help. Depending on different decisions the player makes, will eventually impact the direction and or ending the game will take. The idea is to create a zone where the player can learn about mental health, coping mechanisms, as well as self-care. The game is used to show others how someone who suffers from mental health or suffers from mental illness can still live the life that they want. As time goes on, the player gradually changes the character to, in a sense, shape and give them an identity. Just as building habits is a long and sometimes tedious process, one that starts off small and only grows from there, this game aims to mimic that idea in which small decisions and good habits begin to impact the overall experience in health. Now, let me demonstrate the proposed solution. The name of the game is Yunoya. On one hand, the word means feeling of goodwill, or in other words, being friendly and wanting to help. I took the other approach, which means a pure and well-balanced mind, or beautiful thinking. Because while it is difficult to have a well mind, it is something that, in a sense, by taking care of one's mental health, we can strive closer to it, which is the game's objective. Right. Let's see. Right. Just check. Here of sound, audio. Okay. All right, that's fine. No, it's okay. So see. It's oops. Okay, well, I think that's the highest it will go. So, for this demo, this tutorial will be demonstrated. Within this section, there are 3 endings. While I will not be showcasing all endings, I will try to demonstrate the good ending, or the ending that will progress the main story. However, on the chance that I do trigger the bad ending, depending on the time and other factors, I may decide to try again. Unaya starts off with an animation cutscene that gives the player the background of the story. All right, this is the beginning of the actual gameplay. I do not have a function where the dialogue would continue when certain seconds are up, so I will have to manually click through it. All right, this is the first branch of the story. So because I'm going for the good ending, I will choose to yes to get up. All right, so the first part of the tutorial is to look for the objective in this area. Before I go into that, I will talk briefly about the game environment. It is in this monochrome kind of setting, which symbolizes the mental state of the current character. And another part is at the top right, there is a timer going, which symbolizes the time of the day. On the bottom right, you can see there's a heartbeat counter. If you were to click on it, then it shows a minigame as well as some heartbeat sounds. We will get back to that in a moment. On the left, you have the inventory along with the main menus. As you can tell, the journal does not have anything in it, but we will get back to that as well. Oops. All right, you can use the keys to move around the room. And it's a very small area. You can interact with objects. Not sure why it's doing that. If we were to try to leave, it does not let us. We can also try to end the day, but I will choose no. You can notice that the game has started to dim, which is due to the time. If you look, it's now 10 o'clock, which I made it so that the global volume of the environment would decrease as time went on. Let's try interacting with the journal. I will get back to why I'm not exactly sure why it's duplicating the letters, but I will get back to that at a later part of the presentation. So now the journal has been added to our inventory. We go in and check the menu. It is now up here. So on the left, we have this thing that I call the Tree of Life, which also symbolizes the character's mental state, but in a much easier way to do it. due to the error, I believe should start at 0, but because of this possibly because I was over-clicking, the level went up, but at level 0, there's only 2 XP, and you would gain 1 when you get the journal for the first time. If you were to add the journal, then it would show up on the right side, and it would go up in XP. But now it's level 1. If you were to exit out, the game environment is now a little bit more colorful, which, as I mentioned before, it symbolizes the mental state of the character. So as you level up, the character gets a little bit brighter. All right, and the game is lagging quite a bit, so here we go. Now if we were to try to leave again, you could say no, and of course nothing would happen. Go around the room as usual. But if we were to say yes, then the game environment slightly changes. So you can see that the camera starts to shake, and it would symbolize the reaction to the character in this situation. I wanted to add more, such as blurs and UI glitches, but I wasn't able to do that in time. So you can see that the heartbeat is now going a lot faster. We click on it and play the game. We have 30 seconds to play and get 15 total breaths. Let's try it. As the counter goes up, you can hear the music and the heartbeat is starting to slow down. Don't think I'll make it. Oh well, so challenge is failed. Yes. So this now triggers the bad ending. I made it so that the heartbeat would still be heard, so like you can feel your own heartbeat as along with the heartbeat of the game. All right, so that was the bad ending, and I don't think I could go back and try again since the game is already kind of lagging, and if I were to try again, it would most likely end up the same, so I'll just end with that. All right. So let's go back to the presentation. All right. So what went right? One of the main things that went right was the main functionality of the game, such as the dialogue and its choice-based decision, the day and night cycle, and art animation. The dialogue system was a difficult one to work with. Originally, I had a different system in place where it would manually show, or I would have to manually make the objects appear on trigger. But then I implemented a new dialogue system where it would simply rewrite the text in one main dialogue box. This was much easier to keep track of as well as manage, especially with longer dialogues, as you could tell from the game demo. The day and night cycle also turned out well. It gave it more life, which I also really wanted, and I found it quite interesting to make and use. Of course, there are still adjustments need to be made, but overall it worked well. Another thing that went right was the interconnectivity of the game, which included the scenes and mini games and the cause and effect of each decision. I was quite happy when each scene was able to connect with another, as it was meant to, since it seemed like it would have been a challenging part of the development. The cause and effect, as mentioned when I talked about the choice-based system, was a major contributor to the impact of the player decisions on the outcome. Many of the choices made by the player came from the dialogue and choice system. Now, what went wrong? While there are many things that went wrong, I will simply name a few. First, the save and load system. The current system can load from previous scenes, however, it does not save certain aspects into the next session, nor does it restart the game as if the player was coming in with a new save file. Another part was the animation sequences, overlapping with other animations. For example, originally I had the journal animation at the very beginning, where it flipped backwards before playing the animation video. But for some reason, I guess it was overlapping and it just did not work. But in similar cases, I was able to solve this problem by adding a wait time. But in that particular case, it didn't work. So I would need to investigate it a bit more to figure out why. And another thing was the triggers and collisions. As you could tell from the demo, when I approach and interact with some objects, the dialogue does not appear right away. I'm not exactly sure why. It might have been due to box colliders, or there might have been some type of function that I didn't implement, but it just would take a couple tries before I can actually get the dialogue to pop up. Finally, Unity itself and bugs. In one particular example, I used Unity's onClick function to open the bag or menu within the game. However, at some point, the function would begin to rewrite its object name with the trigger function. So the object name and the file name would not match, which would cause an error, and thus the whole function would be useless. In order to fix this, I had to manually code the function into the script, and luckily it worked. Another thing was the dialogue repetition, as you could tell from the game. And perhaps due to the movement of the character and at the same time as interacting with the object, it would cause the dialogue letters to repeat itself. Or it might be due to the lag of the actual game and which would cause the game to start to repeat. I'm not exactly sure, so I'd also need to investigate more on that. Lastly, the journal storing and implementation. This is a feature that I wanted to add to the journal menu, where once the player adds journals over time, the player could go back and read the journals that they previously put because it was stored. This was an overly complex and time-consuming feature, so I decided not to go with it, but it would have been nice to have included. If I had another month, there would have been a couple of things that I would have liked to add. First, additional features and assets. This would include quests, objectives, NPCs, maps, scenes, as well as more implementation of coping mechanisms and mental health related information. I would also like to reiterate save and load system. This would most likely mean that I would need to redo the whole system from scratch. And I think that would be one of the major things that I would have to do, since it is very big part of the game that you would need to have a save and load system. Next would be a new UX design as well as art music. I want to improve the UX design as well as receive feedback from actual users who would play it and get a better sense of how the user would actually play it instead of just me. I also want to recreate and produce new art that is more in the image of the game. Originally, I would take inspiration from other games and styles, and it would just be more personal if I was able to do it in my own style. I also want to do some additional research that may include possible interviews with individuals who are suffering from mental illnesses, just so that I could have a better understanding of how mental health affects them and just anyone. To conclude this presentation, I would like to briefly talk about what I learned from this experience. First, I learned Unity and C#. While I have had experience with Unity, it was not to this extent. Needless to say, I had a large learning curve. The art and animation were something I also had to learn, since I only had really done 3D animation. It was interesting to work with assets that were more limited, especially in direction. And you always had to keep in mind what it would look like if it were real. Lastly, I learned game development and the many challenges that come with it. It was such as time management and game design, as well as UX design. As a solo developer, I was the one in charge of everything, and it was quite overwhelming. I had to learn a lot within a limited time frame and pick up skills that I didn't have before. Overall, it was a big learning experience, but I did have fun doing it. These are some of my references and assets I used, both within the game and the PowerPoint. Any questions?
So as you went, doing this, you kind of wore the hat for all the different roles.
Yes.
And knowing I know what the answer will be, but I'm interested. So which of the roles that you did here now that you've gone through the experience would you you were to go out and get a job tomorrow, would you be interested? Do you want to be the programmer? Do you want to be the designer? Do you want to be the game writer?
Yeah.
What aspect did you, and did this change your perspective on your science at all?
I would probably be more towards the design aspect and possibly game writing, because I found that actually pretty interesting. Planning out a whole game was something I've never actually done before, so this is really cool. And it did change the way I viewed computer science, because when I was sitting in class, I would think, oh, this is something I'm not super duper interested in. But when I put all the stuff that I learned from class of such as software engineering, all the animation classes I took, and made it into a game, I could see like, oh, this is where everything's fitting together.
It actually is pretty common for folks to write video games. I think. It's like a kind of known thing.
Yeah. I could beat it half the time.
This is my cross-platform app. As you can see, there's no way to create an account for this because ideally I would have this connected to everyone's food numbers and password, but obviously they don't just give that away to people. So I just have a database with the information in there. And then there's 3 ways you can view the account. One is as an admin, and then a student, or as a guest. So I'm going to start off with a student. And then the password won't show up on the screen because it's set up like as an actual password. So to start, this is the check-in page. So I'm gonna go over to the QR codes that I have. Then if I click the check-in button, scan. Sorry, I'm trying to. So it's gonna say that I wasn't able to be checked in because I chose the wrong QR code, and then I'm gonna show you what it looks like with the correct QR code. And then it's gonna give me a notification that says that I was checked into the game. And then I'll get more into that in a second when I switch to the admin view. And then the next tab is the roster page, pretty self-explanatory. You click on the picker and then it will have all the athletes for each sport. For acro, they don't have numbers or positions, so that wouldn't be included. But if you go to a team such as field hockey, they'll have a position abbreviation and a number on there. And then the other information included is their year, major, and then where they're from. And that all depends on what they submitted to the athletic communications department. So some people may or may not have certain things. The next tab is the calendar tab. Again, pretty self-explanatory. Click on a date. So I'll click on today's date. And it has all the events that are here. And then if say I want to just view a team's specific schedule at the top here, I can click on team schedules, and just like the roster, I can choose a sport, and then it's going to have all the games. Then in the settings page, let's say I do need something from the athletic website, I can click on this button and it will take me to the athletic website. And then now I'm going to log in as an admin. So initially, it looks pretty much the same on the check-in page, except at the top, there is a Manage QR Codes button. So here is going to be, you can slide on any of the events to see who attended the event and checked in, and then you can also get the QR code that you would then display at like when you walk into events. The athletic communications department, what they would do is like have a raffle type of thing, so then they could choose someone who attended, and then maybe at halftime, so that people at least stay till halftime of the game. So if you slide, you'll get a PDF of the QR code that you can easily print. And then also if you want to see the attendance, so we're logged in as student 1, so that's, it appears on the screen. And then if you create generate random attendee, it will just give you someone so that you don't have to actually just randomly choose one. And now I'm going to go into the settings page, and you can add or edit or delete certain sports. So I'm going to do add a new sport. Women's wrestling is a sport that's going to be, I think, next school year. So I'm going to add that one. And then I'm going to add an extra S at the end just so I can edit it later. And because this changes so much of the app, it is going to ask you to restart. And since there's no way to actually make an app restart for iOS, I just have a while loop that just keeps telling you to restart, so you can't really leave it. So if I click save, oops. I accidentally did one that already existed. So let me go back in real fast. So now if I go onto the picker in the roster page, I will have women's wrestling. And so you can add a new athlete to the roster. So I'm just going to add myself. And then the only things you need are a sport, and then first name, and then what year you are, because those are all things that every student would have. So if I click save, I can click the refresh button at the top, and then I'm there. Let's say I want to add my last name. I can slide and click the edit button, and then add my last name. Save, refresh, and then that works. And then I'm just going to add a extra person just to show how to delete it. So again, you can slide, delete, and you don't have to click refresh for the delete portion. And then you can do the same thing in the calendar. So if I want to add an event, let's say I want to add my first wrestling meet. Scroll down. If you put 12 a.m., it just puts it as TBD because I assume no games are going to be at midnight. So I'm going to do 5 p.m. and then you need to have at least a home team and a game type. So if you add that to the calendar, then the event will be on there. And then the same thing as the rosters, you can edit or delete, and you can do the same thing from the team schedule portion. So if I wanted to add a game, I could here. So now I'm going to go to I'm going to edit the sport. Let's say somebody realized that I spelled wrestling wrong and added an extra S at the end. I can slide on these, and these are all the sports codes and then the display names. So I'm going to click edit and then correct my spelling. And then it's going to, again, ask me to restart. So I'm going to do that. And now you can see the check-in page has my new event, and wrestling is now spelled correctly. Let's say the wrestling team realizes I'm the only wrestler and I'm not going to win any matches because I have 0 upper body strength, that we want to delete women's wrestling. So here it's going to ask you if you're sure, because it's also going to delete all the corresponding athletes and events. So if you accidentally did that for football, that would take forever to input every single athlete because there's like 100 of them on that team. So I'm going to click yes. And again, it's going to ask me to restart. And then instead of showing you the changes as an admin, I'm going to go into the guest user. And so the guest user is basically the same as a student, except for you can't check into games. Originally, I wasn't going to have a guest user. I didn't think of it. But then I was showing my parents the app and they're like, well, we can't use the app. So then I wanted to have a way for other people, if they just don't actually go to school here, they can view the events. So now women's wrestling is not on here anymore. But the roster and calendar are basically the same as the student view, and then instead of logging out, it just says to go to the login page. So that's essentially the app. I think I learned a lot from this project, just creating something from beginning to end, and I think a lot of like the issues I had made me a better programmer and just like overall better at solving problems. Any questions?
So, you said that, well, let me ask you this. Why does the app need to restart after you make a change? You said it's because there's so many things where it appears in the app. Why is the solution to restart?
Because on the roster page, because I can't, like when you log in, it like pushes a new like stack of all the pages. Except for some reason, the roster page, the on appearing method doesn't work I have no clue why. I tried to go around it, but the picker won't update it. So then like the index is all wrong. Like when you choose something, I spent like hours trying to figure it out. And then I was like, we're just gonna have the user restart.
You were using on did appear or on will appear?
Just on appearing.
I don't know that it should make a difference. Because if you did on appearing, that means it's already on the screen, and sometimes, so if you do the update then you see the screen appear, then all of a sudden everything would update real quick.
Yeah.
If you do on will appear, then that happens before human eyes actually see it.
Okay.
So so it sounds like you tried to do it what I would call the correct way.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, your things weren't updating. So probably if you wanted to waste more time, you could have figured it out, but that would have been the way to do it rather than rebooting, but that's what it sounds like. Well, I mean, so what's your sport?
Soccer.
Soccer. Okay. So by the way, I like the sport on there, the WTF sport. Women's track.
I was debating whether putting that, because like we have them, because I work for the athletic communications department and we have like all the codes, and I'm like, that one's kind of, I don't know if I really want to put that one.
Really. But yeah, so I mean, I know this has been talked about for a while, having some way of not just for sporting events, but checking in for any events. Student Life has actually looked at things like this before. Is there any intention of taking this and trying to make it a real thing? Or is this just another idea that maybe somebody picks up later on? Or
I had discussed it with my boss. He did say there was a need for it and they did have a meeting. So I plan on showing him it. I don't think it's like fully ready to like be an actual thing, but I think getting his input would be good too. But I wasn't originally going to have rosters because I don't know, I never look at anyone's roster personally, but
Sure.
then he said a lot of students requested that, so that's why I added that.
Sure. Good idea, definitely useful. Other questions? Quiet crowd tonight. Going once?
How did you get all the names?
So my boss gave me access to like the back end stuff. They use this thing called Presto Sports. And so I had to download each team individually, and then I put it in like Google Sheets and had to like adjust everything so that I like decided what information I didn't want to use. Like I didn't really think anyone really needed to see height and weight. So like I got rid of that. The hardest sport was esports because they don't have like a position, and like it was like because was gonna put like the games they played as a position, but all the positions are abbreviations, so it's like at most like 3 letters, and their games are just like massive. So for them, I just kind of I think they just have their name and then like their major and stuff. But
Questions?
Yeah, it's Azure. I think most people call it Microsoft Azure. Azure is not bad. Yeah, yeah. In fact, that might even be more correct. Azure might be more correct. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but I made sure as soon as you said Xamarin, I immediately messaged Emily and just added one additional person who could say it. Because I did ask Blade the next day to say it. I just wrote he nailed it. Perfect pronunciation of Xamarin. If Blade can say it, anybody can say it. Yep, you got a thumbs up.
Is that I'm sharing this screen, right?
You can
Correct.
Okay. It's doing that. Trying to do extended. There we go. I think that works better now. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Jonathan Yakimo, and for my senior capstone presentation, I worked with my this is not working.
There's a
Okay,
USB.
yeah. So for my presentation, I worked with my internship company, which is Unique Systems Design Inc. in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan. That is a Detroit suburb. So I started this internship last May at the beginning of the summer, and I got to get my first experience doing embedded programming. So that is a kind of like programming where you like program these embedded systems. And this is what this company specializes in doing. They do like electrical engineering as well and computer engineering, but that was my experience this summer. And so a little more about embedded systems. Embedded systems are these boards you see right here. And they handle various different things. They like run like the computers in a car. They might run the computer in a little electronic product. Could be like a some sort of like a Fitbit kind of thing. Like just anything you can think of that has some sort of computer in it. So a lot of times this is like lower level programming in like C and stuff like that. So for my project, I am solving a problem. So the thing is, when you're doing embedded programming, especially in certain cases, you're like calibrating different motors with like torque, the speeds and stuff like that. And when you have to go into the edit the IDE each time and have to change that value, it can sometimes take a while. Because you have to like actually stop the debug. That takes like 5-10 seconds to actually stop the debugging, and you got to go in and change the value. Then you got to go ahead and run that again, recompile and reflash that. By the time that's over, that's like 15 to 30 seconds, depending on how long the code is and whatever. And so that's like a loss of productivity. And in order to solve that, what I wanted to do is create an application which would allow you to directly access the variable over a connection to the computer and just change it manually on a PC app versus having to go into the IDE and change it. So that way, when the developer is actually like testing which values work best, they can do that like instantly and see how that interacts with the motor, for example. And then that's kind of the goal there. So instead of having to wait for the compiler and do that all manually. So it should increase productivity. And then once they find the right settings, they can go in and change that later on. But this just allows them to try different values first. So my solution is I created this application for my internship company called the Embedded Variable Access and Calibration Tool. This allows the engineer to access and change the variables they want tracked on the PC. So what they would do is they would set up an array of certain variables they wanted to have tracked, and then like a pointer array on the embedded side. And it allows them to save lots of time, as all they would have to do is go ahead and click on the select the variable ID, and the new value, click send, and it almost instantly changes the value. So if you had like a motor hooked up, it would like instantly start going faster or slower depending on the value you put in there. And it also lets you display all the variables you have tracked. You can actually save the variables that you can actually save each variable in the current states to a file and then load it up later. So if you want to stop working and you can resume it later, it also lets you like help figure out with what the permanent value should be. I think that's a big, so it's, and the other thing about this too is we wanted this to be relatively easy to implement on other development boards as well, on other projects. So I implemented this on one project that my company is actually working on right now. I can't tell you what that project is really doing, but I can tell you like what my thing does, and that it's being used to help calibrate that project. I also set it up on a second development board, just really quickly to demonstrate that it can be used and used on other development boards as well. So that it's like a productivity tool that can be used for easily configured for other projects. And now to the live demo. Okay. So I just started running the application on the firmware on the embedded board right now, in this development board right here. And I'll hold it up later on. I just don't want to like mess with the power connections right now. And now I'm gonna go ahead and run the application on the PC end of things. So this is my little application tool right here. So I'm using serial communication, specifically UART in this case. And when I first started working on this project, I didn't really know what UART was. I kind of had heard about it before and had a really brief understanding of it. And that turned out to be rather simple overall, but the process of actually learning how it worked took a while because I wasn't really sure how to approach it and how it worked exactly. So what turned out to be relatively simple to actually implement took me a long time because I didn't know certain things about it. So, so right here, I can select the COM port. So if you look on your devices, when you plug in a device to the computer, it will pop up a COM port right here. And I am using this Python library to access that. And then this, what this does is it automatically detects all the current COM ports on your machine right here. So I'm going to be using COM port 3. And then I'm going to select the baud rate, which is like the speed of the communication of this two-wired communication type. And then it's 8 bits of data at a time. So that's the byte size I want to send across. The stop bit is going to be 1, and the parity bit is going to be none. So that would allow me to connect to it. So right now, if you can see this sort of log in the background, it just connected and opened the serial port. Now what I can do is I can click the refresh all, and it will go ahead and read all the values and load them up. Right now, I don't have a very meaningful name other than just a number, but hopefully in the future, we're going to have a way to do that that's more meaningful. That's just not a thing at the current moment. So I have like 34 variables loaded up on this project that are being tracked. And I can go ahead and click on variable 7 right here, for example, load that up over here. Then I'm gonna right now it says 10,000, and I'm gonna go ahead and change that to 55. I'm gonna click send, and now it's 55. And I can prove that it's still a number by refreshing it. If after the refresh is done, you'll see it's still 55. I don't have like any motors I could hook up to this, unfortunately, just like to show that aspect. But like if there was, it could change the speed of that, for example, or torque or whatever the setting was for that specific variable. I'm gonna change another one really briefly just to demonstrate the save and load feature. Okay, so now I've changed these two variables, both 5 and 7, and I'm gonna go ahead and save that to a file. And I'm gonna call this demo. And I made a custom extension type for this. So I'm gonna go ahead and save that. So now that saves that to a file, and I'm gonna go ahead and open that file to just show you that really quickly. And you can see that there's the value's been saved to that file. So then I'm gonna go ahead and now I'm gonna close the application and show what happens when I load it back up again. So when I load the application back up again, right now I don't have any communication, so I'll need to reestablish that. Connect that again, and this time I'm gonna load the values. So I'm not gonna load it from demo this time, I'm gonna load it from a different one. And so now I'm loading all these in, and it's a different set of values. And you notice I had how I had 5 at a different value, and how it had 7 at a different value. They're back at different values again, because I had loaded that from the file and then sent those new values back to the microprocessor and changed the values again. That is, I think, the gist of that functionality. Another thing that I included on this project was what happens if you don't initialize the right connection settings. So I'm gonna set this to the wrong baud rate, for example, and try to connect. And it won't let me do that. So I didn't want to have people like not understanding why it wasn't connecting because the connection settings weren't right. So what it does is when it connects, it actually sends a test command to the device to check to make sure that the communication actually is working. And if not, it'll pop up this warning. And I have like similar error checking throughout. So if it doesn't go right, it'll let you know. It also like has log files that it prints out so that if something weird happens, you can kind of see what was going on, and just for debug purposes. And I think that can be kind of helpful for the engineer using this tool as well. Now, since I demonstrated that on the actual like project that I was implementing this in, I'm going to go ahead and quickly stop that and then demonstrate on another board just to show that it works with that as well. Close that out. Go ahead and stop that. So this was the development board that I was writing this on before. And now I'm gonna run on a different one. Or something like that. This would work on like anything. You just have to you have to configure there's some like files you'd have to drop.
Yep.
Some of my code you drop it on that you might have to change them up a little bit. I'm still
Microcontroller.
yes, anything that has the ability to do UART connection to the PC. At the moment I'm trying to work on making it easy, so it's just you change one file. Right now at the moment I have to change several different files, but ideally the goal would be that all you have to do is customize a few things in one code file, and that would allow you to do all the changing. It kind of just depends on the UART drivers for each micro though.
Sure.
That's connected. I'm gonna go ahead and power that on. I think I already loaded the software on this one, or the firmware on this one, so I don't need to do that again. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead. Let me actually just do that again to make sure I did. I'm gonna erase that, target, and then download. So I just reloaded that onto there again. I'm gonna go ahead and open up this application. I need to go to the config first and change the, because the variable length is different now of the array. So I'm gonna have to go ahead and change that to, there's only 2 variables in this demonstration that I'm tracking. So I'm gonna save that, load it up again, because I have a config INI file to do that at the moment. I would in the future like to have it actually be on the micro itself that I would read from, but I hadn't gotten to that point yet. So this is using COM port 4. It's using the same baud rate as before and all the other same settings. I'm gonna connect to that. You can see it connected. So now I'm gonna go ahead and click refresh, and you can see there are 2 variables I'm loaded up here. So I'm gonna go ahead to variable 1. I'm gonna set that to 1 right now. And that is gonna go ahead and turn on some LEDs on here. I don't know if you can see those from here, but the LEDs are now on. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn those off. And go ahead and set this other one to on. And you can see it's now flashing. And if I want to turn that off again, I can just go ahead and set that to 0 again, and it should turn itself back off. See? So that is just a quick demo of like what would happen if you actually had a motor on, so to prove that it actually does like change the variable values on the device. If that makes sense.
Like the lights and motors.
Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, like this project is something that they have engineers working on. They're not going to like try to send out like all the stuff to that to some intern in Wisconsin. Especially since I probably can't show like the confidential aspects of that like project. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and back my presentation now. Go ahead and resume from here. Go away. Okay. There you go. All right. So now the demo is over. I'm gonna briefly go through how it works. So this is a brief like diagram of the kind of basic architecture of how this works. As you can see, right here is so what it does, you have the PC side and you have the embedded device side. So what happens is the PC app will utilize a communication protocol and talk to the microprocessor, and then the microprocessor will then talk to the memory to change the values. That's just like the very brief gist of how it works. This is something I had in my requirements document. Okay, so there's 2 aspects to this, the PC application and the embedded device. And the PC application, we use the Python language and the PySerial library, and the GUI was done with tkinter. The Python was something that my internship company wanted to use for the PC application, because that's what they usually do most of their PC applications for when they do internal projects like this. So it sends commands to the micro using the serial communication, sends, receives data. It's easily configurable to different devices, like I showed you. You can easily configure it to different communication types. Like sometimes you're not going to utilize a full 8-bit. Like it just depends on the device and what settings you're using, and also the file save features. The embedded device, well, that's using C in this case, and that's what my code is written in. So this would only really support devices that are using C. Like because this code is, I'm not, the embedded side is not going to like work on a Python embedded code, for example. Which is kind of weird anyway. I don't think that's really common anyway. So, and that's gonna what this does is it's gonna listen for any commands coming from the PC. So the PC is like the master device in this case, and the embedded device is gonna be like a slave. So it's gonna be listening for any incoming commands, and then responding to those commands by sending data or receiving data in various manners. And then the actual variables that are tracked are basically a pointer array. I think most of us have heard about pointers before, so I can explain that later if you have questions, though. So UART communication basically uses 2 wires, and these are some images I pulled off the internet. And basically, the TX wire on one side will connect to the RX wire on the other side, and that's how it works. So it's basically some communication across one wire. It has various speeds. and you only ever have two devices connected to each other. Some of these like various communication protocols, you can have like one master and like up to like 100 different slave devices. This one is only one to one. This is kind of the basic packet, and that's just kind of illustrating how it's sent bit by bit across. That's sort of a brief run view of how this rundown of how that works. I can talk more about that later if people want. So what went wrong? I had some problems learning how UART worked because at first, when you read online about how it works, it seems very simple. When you actually get to implementing it, it's not actually that way. So at first, I tried to write some stuff and I was going way too low level. So that was wrong. Then I had eventually the documentation also for the specific micro I was implementing this on wasn't the greatest ever. Some micros have like really nice website documentation. This just has like maybe 6 or 8 example projects. Like that's all they have. And that's not, they don't even have very good comments on some of those projects. So that was kind of confusing at first. And I got help from my internship company and they gave me different like bits and pieces of advice here and there, but that took a while. But now that I've like actually done this, I was able to actually like get this up and running in a very short period of time after I learned how to actually implement a communication driver because I've never done that before. I've used drivers people have already written in this summer, but I've never actually like written one myself like that. So I'm still relatively new to embedded programming, and one of the challenges with embedded programming is that you can't just like output the file. Like you can't just like output like a printf. You don't just have like a printf statement where you can just print to the screen everything. So debugging can be a little bit more of a challenge. So you actually have to go in and use like the debugger and breakpoints, or sometimes you have to actually use communication to send stuff across, and that just makes it challenging. So you can't sometimes you'll write some code and it doesn't do what you expect because you can't actually test it very well, and that leads to many different areas where it could fail, and that just makes it much more of a challenge. Also, I wasn't super experienced with C. I'd learned some things this summer, but I still had a lot to learn. So when I actually started doing this, I started running different various like C errors that were my fault because I didn't like do it right. So the compiler would keep putting out warnings and everything like that. So I had actually like spent a lot of time just learning how different things on C worked. So I just spent a lot of time like using like online GDB, for example, just to, like test different concepts as I went along, implementing these different features just to make sure I was doing it right. Like I said, I already mentioned the documentation thing. Oh, another thing, the communication. So once I actually got the drivers working, there was the other issue. So sometimes with the communication, like it wasn't like occasionally it would just fail. Like I would send maybe like read maybe 10 variables from the device and then it would just like break for some reason. Or at first I wasn't even getting like certain communications across because the Python, the serial driver is like super slow compared to the embedded computer. So I actually had to introduce like delays and stuff like that, or waiting until the right amount of bytes are in the incoming buffer before I could actually read in messages. So that solved that. And then just the actual process of creating these command back and forth protocols was really tedious at times. So it was just like you're like staring at this and it's just like lines of code and it's just like kind of very tedious at times. So that took some time. But once I got that resolved, it was really like I felt super accomplished once I got that done because that was hard. Like I would just get up on my chair and be like, yes, I got that. And then the like project planning stage took a little while too. So since I was doing this in my internship, at the beginning of the semester, we spent some time going over like the project kickoff meeting at the beginning of the semester. We had various like different meetings talking about like, what different options you might go with this project. And that took a couple weeks and probably like 50 to 80-ish hours is my guess. So a rough estimate of that. And I learned a lot with that too, because like that's a lot of just like planning and talking about different options and stuff like that. So that was a good experience too. But that did like slow down how long it actually took to actually get to the point where I could actually get a hold of the hardware and actually get the go ahead to actually start programming. This is another thing. So for a little bit of this project, I had to read stuff like this. Obviously at Concordia, we don't really learn much about like computer engineering. So this kind of thing was kind of foreign to me. And I'd done a little bit with this in the summer, but I definitely had to get some help from some of the other senior engineers and other engineers at the company to help help me how to look at this and understand like what pins I need to access, for example, to utilize communication. This is just the processor off this development board right here. So what went right? I think I was able to actually accomplish a majority of the goals that I had in my requirements for this project. So like most of the features I wanted to implement, I actually got implemented. And in the end, there's still a lot I could add on to it to actually like make it better. Because like I said, right now the one variable names is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 aren't the greatest. And I think like actually like maybe having a name that actually tells you what it does would be better. And that would be something I'm gonna work on implementing later on. Getting to work in a corporate environment was a definitely good experience as well, especially being like actually starting on a project, doing this by myself. Versus like the last project I did this summer, I was sort of added in part of the way through. And I didn't do very much to it because it was sort of like me learning a bunch and only implementing a few features. But this, like I was doing like most of the stuff, like all by myself instead of just, you know, learning and doing small bits of it. Which like I said, I gained lots of experience with C programming and embedded programming in general. That was really great. At times, this was like a challenging and tedious. I spent like hours just reading documentation, like these big, you know, sometimes it was like 100 pages of like a PDF file of just like documentation on like low-level drivers and stuff like that. That was also when I was going the wrong direction at one point too, but so like I lots of documentation reading. A lot of times that can be very tedious. And I'd say it was extremely rewarding once I got some of these bugs that were like really hard out of the way. In fact, just earlier this week, I was able to finally fix the big bug with the communication where occasionally when I was reading variables from the device, it would actually not return the variable type. It would just return like it wouldn't actually send the right thing across. So it would be like only like maybe 5 of the 30 variables would have been like errors instead of that. So I got that fixed and that was super rewarding when I got that done. And I learned a lot about, like I said, this area of computer programming that I haven't been doing a bunch of at Concordia until I started learning how to do it at my internship. If I had another month, like I already mentioned before, I would be implementing the more detailed for variable names. Maybe also display the variable type as well. I have to look into the feasibility of that with not putting too much code on the micro as well and stuff like that. And one thing that I think would be ultimate goal for this, or would be super cool, would be trying to have a way to just detect the variables out of memory instead of having to have the engineer define the array of variables. But when I looked into that, that seemed like super complicated and there wasn't a ton of how to do that on the internet. So we decided to go a easier route that would be more doable in a shorter amount of time, just so we could have like something work in the interim until we could go and try to do this. If we still want to do that, we might go that direction again. I'm not sure at this moment. I think that's what I have. So any questions?
Now, when you went through 200, your group did Python, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so now we use C++ in the class, and we just had a discussion in class the other day about they just released a new update, top languages or whatever. Python's #1, so it's not like you wasted your time. But C is a popular language still, specifically because of embedded systems. Like this. So,
Yeah, and this is a huge area of programming too, especially in like because you have all these different like smart devices nowadays. You got smart refrigerators, you got like smart vapes. I don't know why that's a thing, but it is.
So now that you've gotten into doing some of this stuff, I mean, is this a direction you think you want to go with your career? Like, was this, I mean, it sounds like you had fun with this experience.
It was like super cool.
You want to do this?
It would be cool to work with this company because like they get a lot of different customers that come to them and are like, hey, can you do this project for us? Like, and I think that's kind of fun to like just be doing new projects all the time. Like you may work on a project for a month, for like a year or a couple months, and then you're done with that. You move on to something new. And like seeing different, like being able to like just go through different projects your whole career, I think would be fun.
Okay. So is your plan to keep working with them?
That would be not ideal if I get hired with them in the summer.
Okay.
In the
That's
spring.
You've already started talking about?
Yes. But obviously it's not a guarantee yet, but it'd be cool if it did happen.
Yeah.
And if not, there's other areas of computer science that'd be fun as well.
Sure, but I mean, this was good. You can tell that you were kind of passionate about it. You were having fun.
Hope I didn't go over in time.
No, you're fine.
Okay.
Fine. Yeah, I don't really have any questions. This stuff's fun for this, like what I did when I was a lot younger. So I wish computer science was maybe still kind of like this before he did stuff and then things were blinking and not blinking. But, that's why now on these little programmable boards, they have built-in LEDs on them to flash because you can use that for debugging.
Yeah,
when it sees
that-
The value of something is you tell the light to blink 5 times. You know?
That was one of the reasons, like, that's one of the things I did this summer, actually, is I had these little LEDs on here. And like, this development board, I own this one personally, but I was using one of the company's development
Yeah,
boards.
yeah.
Like, I bought this for the project administration. But the company that had one of these that I was using, and like, when I was actually coding it, I would have to like test to make sure it worked and actually like put a green light out or turn the light on or something.
And
And
so for folks who want to kind of play around with projects like this, you might look at like Arduino development kits. There's like Arduino projects you can do out there, and that's just a common.
And that's just much more documentation for that than some of these industry
Yeah,
things.
yeah,
Some of these industry things, it's like they have a couple example projects and they just expect you to know how to like read their example projects and understand it.
Sure.
Um,
Good questions. What? No, go ahead.
When you were saving that, when you were like saving your new code with new variables, was it going directly onto the board or was it saving locally on the computer?
so when I save it, so the variables are saved on a file on my computer. So the save feature, it was saved to this .var profile file type, which I just created. Just to be unique, I guess. And that's just like it's fairly simple. It's just different values and then separated by like colons and stuff like that. Because it doesn't need to be super complicated, but I mean, it does what it needs to do. But yeah, another thing about this project that was kind of challenging too is when you change a value on like that, you have to like declare the type as volatile because C has a lot of memory aspects you have to think about. And like that's how there's a pointers thing. You have to actually get a pointer that points at the memory address when you're changing it. And then you actually have to declare that initial value as a volatile type. Otherwise, like C doesn't like it when you change it without it being volatile type. So
All right, other questions?
All right. So again, I did a website, I used React. So the problem is that many movie theaters websites have a bad UX design, or dated methods without being able to purchase ahead, or pop-up ads or intrusive ads. So my solution, I found a quote from Scott Belsky. He said more options, more problems. And I kept that in mind throughout my project. I didn't want to have like a ton of sub menus. I just wanted straightforward A to B design philosophy. And yep. All right. So for some background. So actually first, I used Heroku for hosting. I use React, obviously GitHub, and then I use Sass, which is kind of a form of updated CSS. And then I'll get into my stack, which is the Fern stack, which has Firebase, Express.js, React, and Node.js. Big reason why I chose Firebase was the admin component. It's a feature of Firebase because it's a NoSQL database that allows you to modify the database through your website. And I implemented this with an admin component. Allows me to use the front end of my site to enter an info that is then stored in Firebase and then taken from Firebase and displayed on the web page. All right. So for a demo, phone UI is not working too well. It's kind of a Chrome kind of lied to me, and then when I got it posted, and it looked a lot different, so I was like, okay. But you can follow along if you go to the web link if you want. Show you. Okay. So it's my webs. Ooh.
It's on Slack, or I'm sorry, it's on Zoom.
It's on Zoom.
Your extended screen, it says 2 on the.
Yeah. Oh.
PowerPoint. Yeah, there we go.
All right. So first, you see my nav bar. It's nice and simple. And then we have the image slider. Goes through a bunch of images I have. Simple home screen with some buttons. The learn more doesn't work because I didn't get to about page yet, but the rest of them do. First, we're going to go through the login feature. So login with Google works on localhost, doesn't work with when I posted it on Heroku. So not sure why. It's probably a config issue, but I just discovered that today. But first, we're just going to register as an account. Doesn't have to be an actual email. All right, so my password is 123456. Register. See that? I'm logged in with it. It's at the top. We're gonna reset it quick. All right. So if I check my spam folder, fresh. Let's do 246812. Go back to the site and we hit login. For 6812. There we go. So reset the password. I'll log out again. And then the rest will be in the admin feature. All right, so the big reason, again, why I chose Firebase for the admin feature, they made it pretty easy with adding products, but I'll get to that in a second. So let's just show times. So I implemented a few features, but right now there's only one price point. I implement child and senior later, but kind of ran out of time. So we got the different categories here that change up. We have a search function. Basically mirrored it with concessions, a little different view. Like I said, the UI is not perfect, but this container, the black background, kind of took me a bit. I was pretty proud of it. Looks better on the homepage, but yeah. So let's just start adding some stuff to the cart. Okay, so it automatically updates the card number. You go to the cart, you see the pictures, not really uniform, but and it comes with the price. I did not implement a checkout feature because there's no point. I don't have anything to sell. And I was maybe thinking about taking donations, but didn't want to do security. But yeah, so that is that portion. There are some security features. If you try to do /admin when you're logged out, they'll say you're not supposed to be here. And I'll take you back. I made a .env file and I put some API keys in there for my server, and then I get ignored it so it doesn't pop up on GitHub. And that also hides my admin credentials and everything. And I think that's about it for the website demonstration. Big help this whole project was the DevTools. Super helpful. CSS is a real pain. So like if I had an issue with this button, just click on it. I could see all the things that are factoring into it. And it even tells you the file location. So big help there. There's also the thing that kind of lied to me, which is this thing. It factors in a little bit better here, but before it was showing wider. So this is what the mobile version would look like. I'll do the iPhone Pixel. So yeah, not looking great, but you did see there was an attempt here, at least in the beginning. There's a different, screen for this, which is one of the only functional parts of it, but that would be something I'd get to later. Quick demonstration of what Firebase looks like. So here we have the account. You can see some of my beta testers here. But yeah, these are all the accounts. I can delete them, remove them, whatever, reset password. We have our product tables, which are used for collections for updating. So you manually add something, which I'll show in a second here. Then it goes into this table. And then storage is just all my images. Heroku, great. I wasn't going to deploy my site, but I really wanted to, so I pushed myself to do it. Actually, wasn't too bad. It just was kind of confusing setting up the server initially. But you can just link it to your GitHub, and it has automatic pushes. So I had a bug fixed, saved it, and my website updated like within 5 minutes or so. So yeah, that's great. All right, so we'll do the admin portion quick. So this is a big feature. So right now I can see all my products. We're gonna add a movie. Call it test. And I'll just use this and give it some info. Actually, we'll do a product instead. It'll be a lot less. Get a price. And all these notifications you see popping up are a tool for Firebase and React called Toastify. It'll be like when there's a success message or error, so if you fail, it'll tell you. And then, yep, it's added, so you can see it here. If you go to products, you can see it there, updated. And yeah, and then it'll be in the database updated too. Big help for Firebase and Google, they like the documentation. So it's really nice seeing the extensive work. I can just search for this example. I said get data, and then you click on the thing, and they have documentation for that, which is a good base and a good understanding tool. So yeah, that was very helpful. All right, and that's about it for the demonstration. Unless I forgot something. Okay. Okay, so what went wrong? The CSS, like I showed, it's unfinished. It's not great. It's technically somewhat usable, but definitely needs a lot more work, especially if it's a real business. There's a lot of clutter overlap and text crunching in some areas. Resolution was not something I initially thought of a lot, and then as I got further in the project, I realized it, and it's a big headache, at least with my skill level, to fix. Pricing, like I said, there's only one ticket price. I'd like to add different options. And more pages, there's not much to it right now. A lot of it was just learning how to do the functionality and getting the different parts working. So what went right? I think account management was working almost perfectly. Login, register, reset password, other than the sign with Google. Filter options, categories, search feature, proud of that. I'd like the search feature on the home page, perhaps, but as well. Admin section, I've made it super easy. I didn't have to interact with the database at all, other than just initially coding it. And then publishing the site, really proud of that. Anyone can go to it. It was great because I could be like, "Hey, mom, go to my website. Tell me what you think." And she went on the phone, so she complained, and I forgot to tell her, "Don't go on the phone yet." But yeah, like that part. If I had another month, I would do, like I said, different pricing, more security. So it verifies that you have a valid email for creating an account. A checkout feature, but I'd have to have a product. I was really worried about security in that place because, handing out your credit card and everything. And then cleaning up the CSS. That's a big part. So yeah. Any questions?
If you had to do this again, would you consider a different framework? Were you happy with the framework? Was there
I considered a lot over the summer leading up to this, and some of my friends at my internship, they told me to use React, and so far I'm really happy with it, like especially with Firebase. I think it was a lot easier than using some of the other databases.
and I mean, React's super popular, so it's not,
Yeah,
it's
it
not
was,
like you picked some super
no, yeah,
random third party thing.
it was definitely between React and Angular, so.
Yeah, both are popular.
Yep.
It's Google versus.
Yeah, I'm not doing a
Facebook.
deep dive, but
Yeah.
yeah.
And what about your cloud? You use Firebase, which obviously, like you said, tons of application.
Yep.
Uh,
And then it was nice. I actually thought I had to pay for Heroku. I can't, I don't think I'm saying it right, but
yeah, Heroku's free. You get one dyno and it goes to sleep after so long, so your site can't just stay alive indefinitely. It'll spin back up.
yeah, well, it gave me a red message and then I was like concerned, but it's nothing. But then it also said $7 a month, but they didn't charge me, so we're good. But yeah, I mean, even $7 a month isn't too bad, but yeah, no, I
That's your
like,
estimated cost.
Yeah.
You're using basic dynos, which that's their processor. So it
Oh,
goes
okay.
to sleep.
oh,
If you use basic ones, that way you can't just have a site that lives perpetually up.
yeah,
If you're not actively using it, your site goes to sleep. So when somebody hits it, it takes like a minute or something for it to spin back
Oh.
up the very first time. You probably saw
Okay.
delays.
yeah.
When you first go to the site, you start developing for a day because of that.
The worst part about this experience was actually, so I did the database in about a day, or not the database, sorry, the server,
Mhm.
but putting it on here, like, it was so confusing with like having to make a Git Heroku master or something. I had to watch a YouTube video on it, and it kept not working. And then in Stack Overflow, one of the only posts I've ever liked is they said clear your cache, your browser cache, and then it worked because it was just showing a blank screen, and I cleared my cache and it worked. So I thought I was like failing the whole time. Yeah. So
A lot of times, another trick for testing something sometimes when it's acting funny is load the page up in incognito mode.
Yeah,
That won't use any cookies. or
Yeah.
anything. That'll at least tell you whether it's you or them or
Yeah.
whatever. Interesting thing with Heroku, one of our early hackathons we went to 7 years ago or so was when Heroku was the first startup company. They were one of the sponsors of one of those hackathons. I think we had 4 students going intern at Heroku. Out of that, that was the Chicago hackathon from PayPal. But yeah, so a lot of these companies have been part of kind of, technology history. Firebase was its own thing that Google bought.
Yeah.
Google used to have something called App. But yeah, so you definitely take the industry standard stuff. I was just interested in whether or not you were interested in branching out and why pick Firebase over like AWS or something like that.
Mainly because it's just recommended to me. And then another thing that I think fixed the server issues, I forgot to change in the JSON file, but that I changed that too, to the new domain. But yeah, other than that, not really a whole lot of issues other than like CSS issues a lot. And I had to make a new collection in Firebase because putting all of them in one collection, movies and products, are not a good idea. But yeah.
Any other questions?
Did you store your card in the database? Because I found when you want to log out, or I think when you like close the window, your card would still be registered to your account.
Yep. So yeah. So if I close this, oh, not that. I did Google how to pronounce it. Okay. Usually it saves the state. I don't know why I didn't this time. But yeah, like I'll log in and then I'll come back and it'll be like 5 card items and then it'll keep me logged in and I'll have to log out. So usually, yeah, it is saved in there. And there's a movies collection, products collection. Originally I just had it all in products. Didn't work out, but it has like the keys that I use. So like I made a category, a created ad, image URL, name, price, and then movies has a lot more, but so yeah.
Anything else? Going once. Going twice. Good work, everybody. We made it 5 hours to do the presentation.